Anything we lead or support starts with the individual. So what kinds of learning and preparation has the coach had to lead that work? Sometimes I think leading teams is not about, leading equity is, the issue is not about leading equity or engaging in equity work, but it's really around the tough issues that have to be tackled in doing the work. And so there are some ways that coaches can support that work. We have national data that shows that we have these issues around disproportionality. So starting there really helps to alleviate that initial internal pressure. Oh my gosh, we're doing something wrong, right? And that's what schools tend to think when we have this conversation. So really starting with that national data and saying, hey, we've had an issue, we've had it over decades. It's showing up across multiple school centers. And so there are things that we can do to address it if it's showing up in our center. But also letting data drive that work, that as they look at it, the data will tell them where they, can focus and go to do the work. I also think that providing teams with an understanding that they're really doing good work already, because often we go in and we try to do equity work and we don't think about what was done before we got here. So really helping teams to understand what educational equity, how we define it, and then to look across our systems, especially if people are implementing PBIS. In what ways does implementing PBIS foster and center equity? It's really exciting when school teams see that they're actually doing a lot of really good things, and then we can say, how do we build on that? And so getting that conversation going, helping teams to understand that we have a history and that history impacts the way we think without us always being aware of it. And so using literature articles to get teams reading for awareness. And then it really takes to own, that pressure off, I'm doing something wrong, to, oh, we have these experiences in life that conditions us in ways that we're not aware. So like when we talk about implicit bias, and then it's not personal, it's more so how do we work on our systems to address these types of things. And equity work is a very personal thing, but it doesn't have to be addressed or entered into in a way that is pointing a finger at a person or any given person, but it's more so now that we're aware that these things exist and that we've all had a social conditioning, what are we going to do about it? I think the only other thing I think about right away is that coaches have to make sure that they support the learning that's involved around centering equity. So looking at how to leverage current systems to do that work. I found schools that are implementing PBIS, often you can leverage the systems. They're looking at data regularly, they're problem solving regularly, they're putting interventions in place regularly, and often there are people assigned to do that work. So we don't want equity to be seen as something separate. So how do we look at what we're already working on and look at how to integrate that work? And I think when teachers and staff and administrators see it's not just another thing, but it's something we're going to do to support all the good work we're already engaging in and to enhance it, I think that makes a difference. We often think about getting in and giving those interventions. How do we give, people are going to say, we want to do this equity work. What do we need to do once we become aware? And I really push that becoming aware is an intervention. Because once we're aware of why the need for equity work, then we can actually apply strategies in ways that really meet the needs of or addresses the issues that are associated with whatever inequities that might be there. And so there's a lot of internal work that needs to be done. And so they're learning about our history, for an example, and how that's impacted us becomes important. And so coaches would really need to make sure that they're saturating teams with experiences where they can see our history. Really getting people to understand that even though we talk about implicit bias quite a bit, and it's really important that we understand it, that there's also power and privilege at work, and that if we really understand that those are at work when we're applying the innovations. PBIS is an amazing innovation. As we're applying the innovations, that we understand that we're not applying them in ways that only benefit some students and not all. So really pushing themselves as coaches and the teams to constantly ask who's benefiting from the way things are and who's not becomes essential. And then continuing to push that question in every effort that's taking place. And there are tools at the National Center for looking at that. There are tools at some of the national equity centers that can be used for doing that. But it really does start with being willing to ask those questions and see what surfaces and not dismiss it away. And then the last thing I was thinking about is that it's not enough to do it, but to do it successfully. So what types of learning, what types of resources are needed in order to make sure not only is it implemented, but that it's implemented in a way that's going to be sustainable and that people feel like we can do this work. So those are the things I think about right away.